Cinema 5D Stage at Photo and Adventure is brought to you by Blackmagic Design, creating amazing solutions for film, post-production, and television. Rotolight, advanced LED lighting, and Canon. Live for the story.
Welcome from the Cinema 5D Film and Video Stage at Photo and Adventure 2019. It's my great pleasure to welcome again Simon Hall from Blackmagic Design. We had this session yesterday already, but it was so popular, so we already knew in advance that we're going to repeat it. We're talking about color grading basics in DaVinci Resolve 16.
Yes.
All right, enjoy.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Brave souls on a Sunday morning. As Nina said, my name's Simon. I work for Blackmagic Design. I am a post-production product specialist. This morning I am going to take you through just some of the basics of grading in Resolve. Can I ask, how many of you have heard of Resolve? Yep, some of you have. How many of you use it? Okay, good. Do you use it primarily for color correction? Do you do some grading in it? Do you do everything in it? Kind of bits, yeah. As I said this morning, I'm just going to take you through sort of getting into grading in Resolve. Now, Resolve is actually split into 7 pages now that you can see that, that you can see run across the bottom of the screen. So as you can see, you've got a media page, a cut page, an edit page, a fusion page, a color page, a fairlight page, and a deliver page. Whatever you edit into your timeline in the edit page will appear in the color page. And any grading that you do in the color page, you can see the grades back in the edit. So everything's linked together. Now, the color interface, when you come to it, it can look a little bit intimidating, but when you know what each window does, it becomes fairly straightforward. So in the top left-hand corner, I have a gallery that allows me to save my grades. Obviously, in the middle, I have a viewer that shows me the clip that I'm looking at the moment. I have a node window up here. Now, I will come to why we use nodes in a little while. I have basically a clip window here that shows me all the clips in the timeline, so any clip that I select on shows up in the viewer. I have a little timeline window underneath as well that shows me exactly where I am in the timeline. And then down the bottom here, I have 3 windows that are actually just called left, middle, and right. The left window has a lot of my primary color correction controls. The middle window has a lot of secondary ones, and the right one contains my video scopes. So, getting started with grading, one of the easiest ways to get started with grading is to do it automatically. Just let the software do it for you. So, you can see my shot here. It's a sci-fi film, and at the moment the clip looks kind of very, very warm because of the lights they used. It's got sort of an orange look to it. So to begin with, what I can actually do is I can auto-grade this. So hidden away, right in the bottom left-hand corner of my left window down here, there's a little A button, which is auto. And what the auto grade does, it just looks at the color and the contrast in your image, and it will try and fix it. So as you can see with that, if I just make this full screen, basically what it's tried to do there is it's kind of gone, okay, it looks a little bit warm because the clip looks slightly orange, and the contrast is a little bit low. And as you can see, it will attempt to rectify that. Now, bearing in mind, this is just taking a best guess, and with all things that you have that are automatic in software, it gives you a good starting point. So I can see with this, it's given me a reasonably good starting point, but I have a parade down the right-hand side. I don't know if you guys use parades at all. If you come from a sort of stills world, you may be more familiar with a histogram. But video guys, we tend to use parades a lot. Simply, it shows you the amount of red, green, and blue that you have in your image, and the bottom of the graph represents black, the top of the graph represents white, and therefore you can use this graph and you can use this scope and gauge what's going on in your image. Now, looking at my scopes in here, you can see, you see the bottom of the scope seems to drop off the bottom. Sort of the bottom of the scope here seems to be clipped. It seems to be clipped by the bottom. So basically what this means is my shadows are being crushed. So I'm probably losing some detail in there. So what I can do is I have a lift control. So the lift control controls the darker areas of my image. And I have a brightness slider just here, and I have a color wheel, so I can control the hue, saturation, and brightness of each area of my image. So what I'm going to do with this is, just to make sure I'm not losing any detail in my shadows, I can just click and drag this wheel slightly up, and as you can see, I can lift this shot up slightly, so now I can see the bottom of my parade, and now I know that I'm not sort of losing any detail in my shadows. The same goes with the highlights. I don't know if you can see here that I've got these sort of little very flat areas at the top of the scope. And again, that to me says that my highlights are just clipping, so again, I'll be losing some detail. So in the gain wheel, I can just recover those a little bit. So that's given me a reasonably good starting point. But can you see with the parade, the green and red graph are level, and the blue graph is slightly lower. And that to me means there's more red and green in my image than there is blue. And obviously if you put red and green together, if you look on these wheels here, if you put red and green together, you end up with yellow. And that's why this image still looks a little bit yellow. So what I can do is I can actually try and add just a little bit more blue to this shot. But can you see, it's a lot of the time, it's the top of the graph that isn't quite level. So you can see here, the top of the graph here is not quite level with the other two. So that tells me that the problem is actually in my highlights. So what I'm going to do, using my gain wheel, I can just click and drag this. And obviously, to get rid of a color, you add a complementary color. I'm sure you guys know that. So if it's kind of yellowy, I can add blue to the shot. So if I drag across here and just add the gain, there we go. So now what I've got is I've got a nicely balanced shot. So as you can see, that's what I started with, and that's where I am now. But this is sort of what we call a correction. This is your primary correction. And now what we want to do is we want to get a little bit more creative. We want to start to build our grade. So when you color correct, you do it in stages. You don't just do everything all in one go. And this is why we have nodes. So you can see, first of all I've been doing so far is simply using one node. So what I want to do now is I want to go and add another node. So I can right click on my node in here, and if I say add node, I'm going to add what we call a serial node. And a serial node is just the default node that Resolve uses. And again, we'll come to using another node very shortly. So what I'm going to do is if I add a serial node in here, now what I can do is I can actually start to work on this clip further. So in my balance, if I take a look, in my balance, my shot looks okay, but it looks a little bit washed out now. The contrast in it is okay, but it's not amazing. But I know my black and my white levels are exactly where they should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my curves. I might just turn off the histogram for a second. So I have a curve, a custom curve in here. And what the custom curve will allow me to do is it'll allow me to sort of sculpt my contrast further. So I want my shadows to be darker, not be clipped, but I want a bit more of a roll-off in the shadows. So what I can actually do is just click and add a point and just push my shadows down a little bit further. And if you look at the parade, I'm actually adjusting the contrast, but I'm not clipping it off again. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a little curve like that, and I'll do the same with my highlights as well. I'll just push the highlights up a little bit. And then again, if I want, I can sort of play with the midtones. So if I want the shot to be slightly darker or slightly brighter, I can do. But what I am going to do is I'm just going to leave it like that. So as you can see, now what I've done is I've just sort of, we've got a nice balance on the shot, and now what I've done is I've just pushed the contrast a little bit further to make it look a bit more striking, a bit more vivid. But now what I want to do is I now want to start to go and maybe apply a color look to this. So this is a sci-fi film, and you know, if you watch sci-fi films, a lot of them have a very similar color palette. They use lots of blues, lots of greens. You don't often see sort of warm, orangey, reddy colors. So with this, what I want to do is I actually want to start to add a look to this. So again, what I'm going to do is I am going to add another node. So you can see I'm building my grade in stages here. And this is going to be my look. And again, I can also label the nodes, you know, because you can end up with node trees that are absolutely huge. So you can actually label your nodes. So for example, I could right-click on a node. I could change the node label, and I'll just call this look, for example. So as I said, now what I want to do is I want to really sort of start to make this cold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push my gain wheel almost towards teal. So I'm really going to maybe go harsh with this. I'm going to push this almost towards teal. I'm going to push my gamma more towards blue. I'm not going to go too far with this. So I'm going to make the shot look an awful lot colder. What I might do is I might actually push my gamma down here. I'm going to move my gain around a little bit more, almost towards green. So as you can see, what I've now created there is quite of a vivid, much colder look. But when you start pushing color into a shot, you've got to be a little bit careful, because what it can look like is you've just pushed color over everything. You've just basically gone, just add green, and it pushes it over everything. So this is where you've got other curves that can come in that can sort of work against that. So for example, if you sort of have color casts on things, you'll probably find in the shadows, you know, if you look at black as a color, it doesn't reflect any color basically. And the same goes with highlights as well. When things are white, they tend to be white. So what I can actually do is I can use a different curve in here. So you can see my curves window, I have lots of little different buttons, and if I click on this, you can see I've got different curves that I could work with. And one of the curves I'm going to look at here is something called Luma versus Sat. So basically what I'm saying with this graph is, look at the luminance of certain areas of an image and get rid of the saturation of color. So maybe at the very, very top end of this, what I might do is I might actually just add another node for this so we can see the difference. And what I'm going to do is just in my highlights, I'm going to just sort of get rid. I don't want to go too far with this. I'm just going to get rid of some of the color in the highlights. So as you can see now, you see her uniform? Because I pushed a lot of color into it, it looks sort of flat, and I'm losing a bit of contrast. But using the Luma versus Sat curve, I've got rid of the blue that was pushed into the top highlights, and now it looks more like a grade, and not just I've pushed a color over the whole thing. And this is where using curves becomes great, because you can use different, you can isolate different colors with it, push different colors. Now I'm getting happier with my grade, but I've still got one problem. Her face. Not that her face is the problem, it's the color of her face. So what I've done doing this look, I've pushed the color into the shot, but now her skin tone doesn't look quite right. And what I want to do is I want to be able to manipulate her skin tone separately from the grade that I've just done. And this is a primary reason why Resolve uses nodes. Because what I can do is I can actually bypass the grade that I've done. So I can take the color from before the color look that I did. Because obviously if I grade from this point here, I'm grading from this bluey green look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bypass this. So you can see if I right click and under adding a node, I'm going to add what we call a layer node. And as you can see, what adding a layer node does, it sort of drops down and bypasses this adjustment here. But bearing in mind, I did my grade here. It's not a problem because I can break the connection and then drag from this output here and connect it to the layer node. Now when I go back to my image, it doesn't look like it looks like I've just thrown everything away. But what I want to do is I want to use a power window. So in my middle window here, I have what we call power windows. They're basically masks. And what I can do in the power window, I have something called a Bezier mask. So in here, what I'm going to do is very quickly, I'm just going to very quickly plot around her face. So I'm going to do that. Also, bearing in mind she moves slightly. This is video. So next to my power window, I have a tracker. The tracker in Resolve is awesome. So what I can do with this, I can simply say, right, go ahead and just track the movement of her face. And as you can see, it sort of follows the points. What I'm now going to do is I'll just turn off my power window for a second. You can see here the edge of the mask is a little bit messy. Let me just turn that off again. It's a little bit messy, but if I just soften the edge of it a little bit, I actually might just need to tweak the top bit up here. I might need just to tweak that a little bit. Add another point in there. Perfect. So now, as you can see, what I've done is I've isolated her skin tone. Now, admittedly, she still looks a little bit orange for the scene. But again, now because I'm grading just in her face, I can sort of tweak this. So what I am going to do is pull the saturation down a little bit. So I have a saturation slider just here, so I can just pull the saturation down a little bit. And I might, just to the midtones, just add a little bit of coolness. But as you can see, what that allows me to do is it allows me to get the skin tone as I want it to be. The other problem as well, I've got my other character here, the character she's speaking to, and again, he's kind of, we've lost his skin tone as well. So again, I can add another layer node. So if I say, if I go into here and I say add another layer node, I've got the same thing. So again, I can keep adding layer nodes and they're all sort of merged together. So I can have multiple layer nodes that all merge together. And in this one, what I want to do is I want to isolate my character's face here. Now, what I can do with this, I can actually use a qualifier. So Resolve, we have something called a qualifier that allows you to pick a certain range of hue, saturation, and brightness and manipulate that. So for example, if I just click on my character's face here, again, if I go into my highlight, I can see what I'm selecting. What I might do is I might try the 3D qualifier. We've got a really easy qualifier to use in here called 3D. And my 3D qualifier will just allow me to drag over his face and select an area. Again, what I'm trying to do with this is not have too much noise. So I do have some sort of matte controls in here that I can tweak. Just a bit of blur radius. I can probably get away with that. Again, it's pulled in other areas of the image too. But again, that's not a problem because using my power windows again, I can simply go around and just isolate his skin tone. I don't think he moves much actually, but again, I'll just track this. There's a little bit of movement in there. So now, as you can see, as soon as I've masked him off, his skin tone is back. Again, he looks quite red. So again, I can pull the saturation down a little bit. And also, his skin tone is really red. So by adjusting the hue slider in here, I can actually just make him look a little bit more orange. So as you can see, this grade, we've gone from that to that. So this just gives you an idea of what you can do in Resolve and how you can build your looks and how you can isolate certain bits of your image. There's another couple of things I just want to show you because Resolve also now has some very, very cool effects. So if you guys shoot a lot of video where you have interviews and people doing things to camera, we have a very, very cool feature for retouching people's faces. So again, with this shot, what I'm going to do with this shot, I'm just going to balance it. It's a little bit out. I'm just going to put some saturation into this a little bit. So what I can do with this shot is, we've got some really cool effects, and one of them is something called face refinement. So if I click on my open effects, and I go and find something called face refinement, I can drag and drop this onto a node. And then if I analyze the shot, it'll analyze the facial features. And it takes into account, it'll track the movement of the shot. and also the facial features. So now once it's done, Resolve will know where the edge of the face is, it will know where the eyes is, where the nose is, where the mouth is. So again, if I just turn off my overlay, one thing I might do, guys, I'm just going to turn off my clips, and I'll turn off my timeline as well. It'll give me more real estate to work in here. So now, as you can see, what I can actually do on the face is I do have sort of an automatic beauty slider. I can go into more detail in this. So I can sort of smooth the skin tone a touch. I can adjust the contrast in the face. But as I said, Resolve knows where everything is. So for example, the eyes, I can go into here and maybe brighten the eyes a bit. I can do eye bag removal. Maybe brighten the eyes ever so slightly. I've got lip retouching, forehead retouching, so the lip retouching, I can push some saturation into that. And as I said, if you use this very subtly, you can actually do a lot. And as I said, because it's video, it remembers all the movement. There's something else as well. There's another really, there's something we introduced in Resolve 16, the newest version of Resolve, which is very cool. And it is object removal. So if we take a look at this shot, I have basically a plane that flies through the shot. Now what I've done with this, just to avoid you guys watching me do this, all I've done is I put a power window around the plane and tracked it. So you can see I've just got a power window around the plane that tracks the movement. Now what I'm going to do with this, I'm going to add a serial node. And I'm going to go to my object removal tool. Actually, what I will do, how you use the object removal tool is you sort of do a mask on one of the nodes, and then you use the alpha output. So you use that mask information on your object removal. And to do that, I can drag from this little blue square here and connect it. And what that will do is it sort of takes the mask information and passes that onto the next node. Now what I can do is if I apply the object removal, and what I want to say is use what we call OFX alpha. So now what I can do is if I do a scene analysis, it'll analyze the shot, and it'll bring up this sort of weird gray mark that appears. So if we're going to play that back, I get this weird sort of gray mark that appears in the shot. But within my effect, I've got something that says build clean plate. And what the clean plate does, it looks at the areas that don't have that object in and uses that information. So if I now build a clean plate, that's pretty good. You can see I've got some slight strange movement happening over here, sort of where the plane crosses the mountain. It's going slightly odd. So what I just need to do with that is I just need to sort of widen the search range. So if I widen the search range, how cool is that? The aeroplane is there. I've done some very clever things in Resolve 16. So yeah, and you've now got object removal. So again, it's not just for sort of getting little things in a shot, rid of little things in a shot. You can actually remove entire objects. It's very, very clever. Well, unfortunately, that's about my half hour up. I could spend all day doing this. Dare I say that a lot of the features that I've shown you are in the free version of Resolve. So all the color correction stuff I did with the windows and the layer nodes and the tracking is all available in the free version of Resolve that you can go away and download. As I said, we do it for Mac, Windows, Linux. Certain things like the face refinement are a studio-only version, but it's 299 euros as a one-off payment. It's not a subscription model. You buy the license and then that's it. Every time we do an update, you just go to our website and download it. If you want to know more about this stuff as well, on our website, under the DaVinci Resolve page, there's a training tab, and we have PDF books that are free to download that take you through editing in Resolve, grading, using visual effects, using our Fairlight audio tool. So again, if you want to know further about sort of how to use Resolve and how to get into it, it's all available on our website. If you want to know more about editing, I'm on at around 3 o'clock again today, where I'm going to go through editing in Resolve. But all that's left for me to say is thanks for coming to watch me on a Sunday morning, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Yeah, we'll have you once again today in the afternoon at 3? 3? About the editing basics with DaVinci Resolve.
Yes.
All right.
Cool.
Now we move on to Philip Bloom with his talk about the GFX 100 and the documentary he shot on it. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned to our live stream from Photo and Adventure 2019. Thank you.